My name is Maria Webb. I am 34 years old. I live in Columbus, Ohio, and for most of my life, my own family treated me like a burden they were forced to carry. Not in the dramatic way you see in movies, not with shouting or obvious cruelty, but in the quieter and somehow more damaging way, the way a family can make you feel invisible while standing in the same room as everyone else. I was the daughter who was always questioned, always second-guessed, always the first name that came up when something went wrong and the last name mentioned when something went right. 3 months ago, my brother Derek stood in my father's living room, pointed at me in front of 7 people, and called me a thief. Not quietly, not privately. He said it the way someone says something they've been waiting a long time to say out loud, with confidence, with an audience, and with a story already prepared. He told everyone in that room that I had drained every dollar from our father Raymond's savings account. Nearly $42,000. Gone in a matter of weeks, he said, while Raymond was trusting me, while the family was giving me the benefit of the doubt, while everyone was trying so hard to believe the best about me. My father looked at me from across that room with eyes I had never wanted to see on his face. Not angry eyes exactly. Something worse. Tired eyes. Believing eyes. Eyes that had already done the math before I could open my mouth to speak.
I did not yell.
I did not cry. I did not explain myself in a rush the way a guilty person might, and I did not beg the way a desperate person would. I stood still, I steadied my breath, and I said one sentence. Dad, the bank has a record of every single transfer. What happened next in that room changed the direction of every relationship in my family, and I need you to stay with me all the way to the end because I promise you, the ending is not what Derek expected when he pointed that finger. Before I take you there, I need you to hold 4 questions in your mind. Who actually moved that money, and where exactly did it go? Why did Derek need $42,000 so fast that he could not wait? How did a single printed piece of paper end a lie that had been building for 20 years? And what did my father Raymond say to me after he finally saw the truth with his own eyes? If you have ever been blamed for something a family member did, drop a yes in the comments right now because this story belongs to you too. Let me take you all the way back to where this pattern started, long before a single dollar ever went missing. My father Raymond Webb is a retired electrician from Columbus who spent 40 years climbing poles in the dark and taking weekend calls that other men turned down. He did not inherit anything. He did not get lucky. He built every dollar he ever saved through early mornings and aching hands, and a discipline that most people talk about but very few actually practice. When he told you he had $41,000 in that account, you understood it was not just money. It was time. It was sacrifice. It was proof that a man from the east side of Columbus with a trade license and a modest house could build something solid if he refused to stop. My mother Linda is softer in every way Raymond is firm, and I say that with love and with honesty at the same time. Linda is not a cruel woman. She never raised her voice at me, never said anything that would sound ugly if repeated out loud. But Linda had a way of making herself very small whenever a difficult moment required someone to stand up, and the person she most often refused to stand up to was Derek. I call her the quiet enabler not to wound her, but because that is the most accurate description I have. She loved us both. She protected only one of us. Derek is 4 years older than me, broad-shouldered, quick to smile, and he carries himself with the kind of easy confidence that makes adults trust him before he has said anything worth trusting. He figured out young that charm worked in our household the way currency works everywhere else. You spend enough of it, and people extend you credit you have not earned. From the time I was 8 years old, I watched Derek live under a different set of rules than the ones I was handed. He missed curfew, and my parents found explanations. I missed dinner once because of a late baseball practice, and I was grounded for a week. I stopped questioning the difference eventually. I simply filed it away. There was one object in our house that quietly represented everything unspoken between the three of them. A plain brown envelope that Raymond kept in the top drawer of his bedroom dresser. He called it his emergency record. Derek knew about that envelope, and so did I. But only one of us truly understood what it meant, and neither of us knew yet how much weight it would one day carry. The first time I understood what was actually happening in my family, I was 12 years old. My mother, Linda, noticed $40 missing from her purse and mentioned it at dinner with that careful tone she used when she did not want to create conflict but needed an answer. Before I could say a word, Derek looked across the table and told her that I had borrowed it for a school trip and forgotten to mention it. He said it so smoothly, so casually, as if he were doing me a small favor by explaining my own behavior. My mother nodded and said she wished I had just asked. She never asked me directly. Not once. I sat there with $40 worth of someone else's lie sitting on my chest and learned something important about how this family processed the truth. The second incident happened when I was 19. I had spent that summer working at a warehouse in Westerville, early shifts, physical work, the kind of job that earns you respect for your money because every dollar has a specific memory attached to it. I saved $1,100. Derek came to me in September and said he needed it for a car repair just temporarily. He would pay me back before the end of the month. I gave it to him because he was my brother and because I had been raised to believe that family did not keep score. He never paid back a single dollar. When I brought it up at Thanksgiving that year, my father looked at me from the head of the table and said, "Maria, stop keeping score." So I stopped saying it out loud. I did not stop remembering. The third incident happened when I was 26. Raymond had knee surgery at Ohio State Wexner Medical Center, and I drove 40 minutes each way to sit with him for 4 hours on a Tuesday afternoon. I left before Derek arrived. Somehow, by the following weekend, the family story had become that I had skipped the visit entirely because I could not be bothered to miss work. No one corrected it. Not even my mother, who knew I had called her from the parking garage on my way out. The hidden ledger across those years reads plainly, $1,100 taken and never returned. For years of being excluded from family decisions I only heard about afterward. One reputation, mine, slowly and deliberately carved into the shape of the ungrateful daughter. Each incident was small enough to dismiss on its own. Together they formed a system. And systems do not build themselves. Then one ordinary Tuesday, the architect made his biggest move yet. 8 weeks before Derek pointed at me in that living room, my father called me on a Wednesday evening and said he was having trouble reading his bank balance on his phone. The text was too small, the screen kept timing out, and he did not trust himself to press the wrong button and change something by accident. That was Raymond, careful with everything he had built. I told him I would come over. I drove to his house on the east side, sat down with him at his kitchen table under the overhead light he has had since I was a child, and helped him log into his account through the browser on his laptop. The balance that night was $41,800. I remember the exact number because of what my father said when he saw it. He leaned back in his chair, let out a slow breath, and said that number right there represents 40 years of not spending what I did not need. He was not bragging. He was accounting. There is a difference, and Raymond always knew it. I did not linger on that screen. I helped him log out completely, cleared the browser the way he liked, poured him a glass of water from the tap, and drove home. I was in that house for less than an hour. I did not write anything down. I did not take a screenshot. I had no reason to. 6 weeks later, my father called me again. This time his voice was different. Flat and careful in the way that told me someone had already spoken to him before he dialed my number. He said Derek had been in touch with him and that the account had been emptied and that I was the last person who had been given access to his login. I stayed calm on that phone call in the way that you stay calm when your body already knows something serious is happening but your mind needs another few seconds to catch up. I said, 3 words. Dad, get the records. Raymond was quiet for a moment. Then he told me Derek had already said I would respond exactly like that I would deflect, that I would perform innocence, that I had always quietly resented the family for having anything worth protecting. I could feel the shape of the trap from where I was standing. But Derek had made one mistake he could not take back. The ally who helped me was a woman named Patricia, a personal banker at the First Federal Branch on Broad Street in Columbus, where my father had kept his account for 22 years. I did not know Patricia personally before that Thursday morning. I knew her name from the back of a card Raymond kept in his wallet because he preferred to deal with one person at one branch, and he had dealt with Patricia for longer than I could remember. I walked in alone without calling ahead. I identified myself at the front desk, asked for Patricia by name, and when she came out to meet me, I explained the situation plainly. My father was Raymond Webb, a long-term account holder, and I needed to know whether I could request a printed transaction history on his behalf provided he authorized the request directly. I was not asking her to bend any rules. I was asking her to follow the ones that already existed. Patricia asked me to take a seat. She went to her desk, called my father, explained the request in clear and professional language, and Raymond authorized the printout by phone while I sat in the chair across from her with my hands folded and my breathing steady. When she came back, she set the pages on the desk and slid them toward me without ceremony, the way someone does when they already understand the weight of what they are handing over. I read the first line and felt something shift in my chest. The best way I can describe it is the feeling of a key settling into a lock, that small, certain click that tells you the mechanism is about to move. The transfers were not random, and they were not careless. They were structured. 6 withdrawals spread across 19 days, each one between $5,000 and $9,000, each one initiated through an external transfer linked to an account number I had never seen in my life. Patricia looked at the account number, then looked at me, and said quietly, "That account is not registered to you." Before I could respond, my phone lit up on the edge of her desk.
Derek.
I let it go to voicemail. When I listened later, he called me dramatic, unstable, and obsessed with tearing the family apart over nothing. I want to ask you something, and I genuinely want your answer in the comments. Would you have answered that call, or would you have let it go and kept building your case? I let it go. I had what I needed, and the real stage was still being arranged. My father had scheduled a family gathering 2 weeks after that phone call, a Sunday dinner at his house on the east side, originally meant to be a simple acknowledgement of his 68th birthday. Raymond was not a man who made a fuss over his own celebrations. He liked a good meal, familiar faces, and an afternoon that did not require him to perform. That was all the dinner was supposed to be. Derek had other plans for it. In the 2 weeks before that Sunday, he had quietly worked the guest list. He called our Aunt Gloria, reached out to our cousin Terrence, and spoke with Howard Briggs, our father's oldest friend, a man who had known Raymond since their 20s and whose opinion Raymond respected without question. Derek told each of them that the dinner was also an opportunity to discuss some concerns about family finances and about my role in them. He framed it as a necessary conversation, the kind of family owes itself when something serious has happened. By the time I found out he had done this, every person at that table had already received his version of events. I arrived 12 minutes early. I said hello to my father, complimented the food that was already warming on the stove, and took my usual seat. I wore a plain gray shirt. I carried a folder, which I set on the empty chair beside me without explanation or announcement. Derek arrived 20 minutes later with his girlfriend. He walked through the front door with the energy of a man who believes the verdict has already been read, and he is simply there to collect. He greeted everyone warmly, shook Howard's hand, kissed Gloria on the cheek, and took his seat at the opposite end of the table from me. The second public humiliation of my life came before the food was even served. Derek stood in the kitchen doorway while Raymond was still plating the bread and said, in front of every person in that room, that he had been quietly protecting our father for me for years. That the account situation was only the most recent example. That he felt the family needed to have an honest conversation about what kind of financial access I should be allowed going forward. Howard Briggs nodded slowly. Aunt Gloria looked down at her hands. My father stood in the kitchen doorway holding a basket of bread and said absolutely nothing. I moved the folder from the chair beside me and placed it on the table next to my plate. I did not open it. I did not ask anyone for permission to speak. I simply waited. And now I need to ask you something before I go any further. If you were sitting at that table with the folder in front of you, would you open it right then, or would you wait for Derek to finish talking first? Derek finished talking, and the table was his. He had built a complete and detailed version of events, the kind of story that works precisely because it contains just enough specific detail to sound like memory rather than invention. He said that during my visit to Raymond's house 8 weeks earlier, I had used the time at the laptop to memorize my father's login credentials. He said I had then accessed the account remotely over the following weeks from my own home, structured the withdrawals and amounts carefully chosen to stay below the thresholds that trigger automatic bank alerts, and moved the money in portions to avoid drawing attention. He said he had suspected something was wrong for a while but had not wanted to hurt Raymond by raising it without being certain. He said all of it with the calm of someone who had rehearsed every sentence. When he finished, Howard Briggs looked across the table at me directly and asked, "Maria, is any of that true?" I said, "None of it." And I opened the folder. There were 3 items inside. The first was the printed transaction history from Patricia at First Federal, 6 pages, each transfer documented by date, time, amount, and destination account number. The second was a 1-page summary I had written myself, clean and plain, listing each of the 6 transactions in order with the destination account number printed clearly at the top of the page. The third was a document from the Ohio Division of Financial Institutions confirming that the destination account was registered to Derek Allen Webb at a residential address in Dublin, Ohio. I read each transfer aloud. Date, amount, destination. I did it 6 times, once for each withdrawal. The room was completely silent by the time I reached the 4th one. I did not raise my voice. I did not editorialize. I simply read what the document said. Derek said the account belonged to a business he had been quietly managing on behalf of the family. A business that would benefit all of them eventually. He said he had been waiting for the right moment to explain it properly. No one at that table had heard of this business before that sentence left his mouth. Aunt Gloria set down her glass and said, "Derek, what business?" Howard Briggs put his fork down slowly and turned his chair, just slightly, away from Derek's side of the table. It was a small movement. Everyone noticed it. My father Raymond sat at the head of his own table and said nothing for a long time. When he finally spoke, he said one sentence. "The folder stays. Derek, you need to leave." Derek did not leave quietly. He pushed his chair back hard enough that it knocked against the wall behind him, stood up, and told everyone in that room that this was a setup, that I had forged the documents, that Patricia at the bank was someone I had manipulated into producing false records. He said it loudly, and he said it fast, the way a person speaks when they are trying to fill a room with noise before the silence can settle into something permanent. Then he turned to his girlfriend and told her to get her coat. She looked at the printout on the table. Then she looked at Derek. Then she sat back down. I want you to understand why that detail matters. That was not a dramatic moment for the cameras. That was a woman who had arrived at that dinner believing one version of events, looked at a document, looked at the man she came with, and made a private calculation in real time. She did not say anything. She did not have to. The act of sitting back down said everything the room needed to hear. Derek left alone. The door closed behind him and Raymond asked Howard to stay for dessert. The next morning, my father called First Federal and filed a formal dispute. Patricia Osei flagged the account immediately, escalated it to the fraud resolution team, and began the documentation process that would eventually lead to recovery. The money did not come back that week. These things do not work the way they do in the movies, fast and clean and complete. They work the way real institutional processes work, carefully, slowly, and with paperwork at every step. Aunt Gloria called me Monday evening. She did not deliver a polished apology. She said, "Maria, I did not know," and there was a long pause after it. I told her I know you did not, and I meant it without any edge behind it. That was all either of us needed to say. I was not looking for a performance of guilt from anyone. I was looking for the pattern to stop. Howard Briggs called Raymond separately that week and told him he was prepared to serve as a witness if legal proceedings moved forward. They did move forward. My mother Linda sent me a text message 2 days after the dinner. It said she was sorry things had gotten so complicated. I thanked her and did not explain what the word complicated was doing in that sentence. The brown envelope was still sitting in Raymond's dresser drawer. And there was one more thing inside it that nobody had thought to look at in years. Raymond recovered $41,000 through the bank fraud resolution process over the following 4 months. It was not a simple or comfortable process. There were forms, interviews, a formal review period, and several phone calls between Gerald Park, the attorney we retained in Worthington, and the fraud resolution team at First Federal. Derek signed a repayment agreement as part of the resolution. He signed it to avoid criminal charges, and that decision belonged entirely to Raymond. My father did not want to spend his 68th year sitting in a courtroom watching his daughter testify against his son. I understood that. I did not agree with every part of it, but I understood it, and I respected it as his call to make, not mine. I did not push for the harder outcome. That is important to say plainly, because I think people sometimes expect the person who is wrong to want maximum consequence. I wanted the pattern to stop. I wanted my father's money returned and his account protected. Both of those things happened. Through Gerald Park, I established a power of attorney arrangement with Raymond that required my countersignature on any significant financial movement going forward. It was not about control. It was about structure. Raymond agreed to it without resistance. He said it was the first time in years he felt like someone was actually paying attention to what he had built. I see Raymond every Sunday now. I drive to the east side. We eat lunch at his kitchen table. He watches whatever game is on in the afternoon, and sometimes we go an hour without saying much at all. That silence is the best thing we have ever had between us. It took 34 years and a bank printout, and a Sunday dinner that nobody will forget to get there, but we got there. Derek and I have no contact. I want to be precise about what that means because it is not punishment and it is not anger maintained at a low simmer. It is a boundary I set because the pattern between us required a permanent structural change, not a temporary pause while feelings settled. Several months after that Sunday dinner, Raymond called me over on a quiet afternoon and handed me the brown envelope from his dresser drawer. He set it on the table and told me to open it. Inside, folded once, was a handwritten note he had written 11 years earlier. It was a short list of the people he said he trusted most in his life. My name was written at the top. He told me he had never shown it to me while Derek was still in the picture. He said he did not want it used against me. Some protection comes late. It still counts. If you are the person in your family who is always blamed, always doubted, always quietly managed and minimized while someone else is excused and protected and given the benefit of every doubt that was never once extended to you, I want you to hear this as clearly as I can say it. What happened to me was not unique. The names and the city and the account number are mine, but the pattern belongs to far too many people sitting alone somewhere right now wondering why the truth never seems to be enough in the rooms where it matters most. You do not have to earn your innocence by performing it. You do not have to be louder or more emotional or more visibly wounded to be believed. The record exists, whether anyone reads it or not. The transfers happened. The timestamps are real. The account number does not change based on who is telling the story. Patience is not passivity, and documentation is not obsession. They are the only tools I know of that survive a room full of people who have already decided what they believe before you open your mouth. Raymond and I have something now that we did not have for most of my life. A relationship that does not require Derek in it to function, does not require my mother to mediate it, does not require anyone's approval or anyone's narrative to hold itself together. It is just a father and a daughter at a kitchen table on Sunday afternoons. That took 34 years and a printed piece of paper and a banker named Patricia Osei, who simply did her job with professionalism and without drama, and I will be grateful for that for the rest of my life. If this story landed close to something you have lived or are living right now, share it with the one person in your orbit who needs to hear that the truth does not expire. It waits. It keeps its own record. And it has a way of finding the right room at the right time. Next time I want to tell you about the Sunday 6 months later, when Derek showed up at Raymond's front door unannounced, and what my father did when he answered it. I hope you enjoy this video. Please like, subscribe, and share. Thanks for watching. We will see you in the next video. Until then, take care and goodbye.